Tom Regan on writing The Case for Animal Rights.
First, it was just a wonderful thing for the NEH in general, I guess, and for philosophy in particular, that they would actually support work like this, a work that was, from its inception, going against the grain of the culture. It would be very easy for the people to say, well, that's not our business. But I knew I was going to be saying things that, or I thought I would be anyhow, saying things that challenged the status quo. And I just think it was awfully courageous of NEH to give me that opportunity. So I had a year off, a year of freedom to work. And I had an idea about what I thought. I had to write a proposal, obviously, and say, well, this is what I'm going to do. But it was a situation where my ideas changed in the course of working on it. It ended up that what I came out with at the end was not what I started off with. And it was intellectually the most exciting time of my life because, as I've said to people, I felt like I was along for the ride. I really did feel like I was discovering rather than creating. I was being led rather than leading. There was something there that was drawing me rather than my forcing it. It was just an amazing time. I got up in the morning, ate breakfast, sat down, started writing, and I was just so happy. It was just so great. It was like, yes, you get that yes feeling and keep writing. And at the time I did a lot of long distance running. I was running marathons and a lot of 10K races and stuff like that. And I just remember I got to the point where I would take pen and paper with me when I went running because, these ideas just kept coming and I just had to write them down. Even if it was just a word or a couple phrases or something that would trigger my memory when I got back. And so I'd sometimes come in from a run sweating and just run to the typewriter. And it was before I having any kind of word processor. It was an old electric typewriter, just type. I don't think I've ever thought any better than I did then, which is a disappointing thing to say, obviously. But it was very exciting. I worked tirelessly. And I wrote the book. It's 400 pages. I wrote it in 10 months. And so that was it. It was out. And I'm a compulsive rewriter, as I say. I've never seen an English sentence I thought I couldn't improve. And so I'm kind of constantly rewriting. So I don't know how many drafts that the book went through. It's a philosophical book. It's not animal liberation. The great strength of Singer's book, I think, is that it is the accumulation of detail. It's not so much the argument against vivisection as it is, for example, as it is just the accumulation of stupidity and cruelty, page after page after page. And it's not so much the argument for vegetarianism, I think, that is the strength of the book, as it is just the gruesome description of what's actually happening. Its strength, I think, is it's proportionate to its quality as expose. This was hidden in darkness, now we put the light on it. This was invisible, now it's visible. A tour de force, but my book wasn't like that. My book, I don't think, has any description of any bad thing that happens to anybody. It's just a theoretical book. And so it obviously never commanded the kind of audience that Peter's did, and understandably so. Peter's book is the sort of book, I think, that for a general readership, and I mean this in a good sense, not a critical sense at all, for a general readership can give people this aha or eureka or whatever experience where Saul becomes Paul. You pick up the book and you're a meat eater and you put it down and you're not. It has that power. And as I say, I don't think it's because of there's some argument here. It's just that you just think, I can't believe this. But as I say, my book just doesn't do that. Have no expose at all. It really is a question of a book in theory. The question is, what's the most adequate moral theory, all things considered? That's really the question that's asked. Now, if it ends up that the most adequate moral theory, all things considered, includes the recognition of the rights of animals, then that's important. But you can just write a book that says a lot of things about animal rights, but if you don't put it within an argument that says, and this is the way we should think about it, then you haven't done much philosophically. My idea was to give a kind of intellectual credibility or standing to animal rights that was beyond a thin response. I wanted to give a thick response, or I wanted to give a deep response, and to put it within the context of theory. I wanted to talk about all the major moral theories, from Aristotle and Aquinas and Kant and Mill and Bentham and contemporaries like John Rawls and Robert Nozick, and put it in that context and see how it would come out. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I had ideas about how it might come out, but it was clear to me that, I mean, what I ended up with was very different. And when I look back on it, I mean, I can see what I was doing. There are different ways of thinking about it. One is you're always struggling with language, the limits of language, I think, when you're dealing with animals. And some philosophers talk about what they call a lexical gap. This is a gap in the lexicon, a gap where there's no word, there's no expression for this reality. And in part because there is no word, there is no reality. To become real is to be named, that kind of idea. I know that that's an oversimplification. I wouldn't want to say that 100% of the time, but sometimes I think that is true. As we've got an odd lexicon, we have humans and then we have animals. It's like all animals are other and different and distant. It's like a semantic way of creating distance. If you think of animals as kind of there's a big circle representing animal, and here's another big circle representing human. It's like you've got these two separate circles that given our lexicon. And see, my interest, you might say, is trying to make the argument that those two circles overlap in really significant ways, and we don't have a word for it. We don't have a name for it. I wasn't aware that that's what I was about, but when I think about it now, I think I was struggling to find the words to name something that has no name. Let's put it this way. When I started off writing the book, I thought I probably would come down on the food question the way I had from the very beginning. I mean, you should become a vegetarian. That can't justify that. And in terms of experimentation, to take that as another example, I thought, well, what I'd probably argue is that if it's really important and if the animals are not causing any unnecessary pain, then that would be okay. So it was like taking the stuff that I'd written in essays and just making a book of it. And those would be the substantive moral conclusions I would come to. And so what that would mean is I would have this notion that animals had rights. I'd try to make that argument, but that these rights could be overridden if there was a conflict between important human needs and animal rights. So that would have been something new and something different for sure. But as I say, it's not where I ended up. But to do that, what I had to do was I thought, try to answer people who were critical of the notion of animal psychology. See, if animals are in the same category as shoes and computers, then it's going to be hard to argue for their rights. I don't know anybody who's going to take that argument seriously. So a precondition of arguing for their rights would be to try to argue for their mentation, that is, for their minds, their psychological presence in the world, for their subjectivity, rather than their thinghood. It was clear to me I had to do that. So that's what I did in the opening part of the case for animal rights, was argue for animal consciousness against the critics of that. And then what I also wanted to do, though, was to argue for the sophisticated psychology that they have. It's one thing to say that if you step on the puppy's paw, it hurts the puppy. But even then, philosophers have had the ability to deny that. But so I had to answer those folks. And quite another thing to say that animals have the capacity to plan and choose and remember and anticipate these more sophisticated cognitive abilities and make choices. And so I wanted to argue that as well. So there are contemporary philosophers who deny that animals have the ability to believe anything. Almost always what happens is that the argument is that they can't believe anything because they can't use a language, that language is a precondition of believing things. And so I had to take on that crowd of people. And there are some very good philosophers who maintain this. Philosophers, I think, who are just better philosophers than I am in general, maintain this. I just think they're mistaken on this point. Then I had to say something about what you mean when you're talking about the quality of life for animals. And so that was all kind of platform building, stage setting. Then the question is, well, what do we think about this now? Assume for the sake of argument that I'm right, that there are massive numbers of animals who not only are in the world but aware of the world, not only in the world and aware of it now, but can anticipate the future and remember the past, who can act with intention, can make choices, have social relations, a sense of social reality, complicated creatures. What's their moral status? And what I looked at was different ways of thinking about their moral status. And as I worked my way through that, it became clearer and clearer and clearer to me that that initial point that I had been thinking, that they had rights, but that those rights could be overridden when they conflicted with important human needs, that was just profoundly mistaken. I was just dead wrong about that. And Helen Jones had been right about it all along. She didn't have a theory for it, but she had the right judgment about it, that rights are really not worth the paper they're written on if it ends up that they can be overridden anytime somebody has an important need that conflicts with them. So at the end of the day, when all the dust settled, what I had to say was, not only shouldn't we eat them, we shouldn't experiment on them either. The one evil was as bad as the other evil, except in terms of the numbers involved. We cannot justify what we do to them because we benefit from it, even assuming that we do benefit. Can't justify violating human rights because other people are going to benefit, and so you can't justify violating animal rights because we're going to benefit. It doesn't work that way. Morality doesn't work that way.